Welcome back. Let's get started. Our first topic in the biology physiology section is going to be about cell structure. So we're going to learn the main components of the cell. So it's pretty simple. First, let's just, we know that the cell is made out of many things, but one of the most important things that's going to help you with pharmacology is understanding the membrane. So the cell membrane in our body is what keeps our inside of the cell separate from the outside. That's mainly it. It's very important, and understanding it will help you understand pharmacology, because pharmacology is basically drugs trying to go through these membranes, and it'll help you understand other concepts as well. So we're going to talk about the cell components and focus on the membrane, and then we're going to transfer to a different topic that's related, but in a different kind of area of basic science. Okay. So again, you want things in the body to, usually they want to pass through the membrane to get from one point to another. Okay, so that's why usually cavities and spaces or organs, everything is kind of usually lined with layers of cells, because we don't want things to move in between the cells. We want things to move through the cells, because the membrane of the cells act as a filter, right? So imagine that all these cells together create this huge membrane, right? Filtering things, preventing selecting which things get to pass to the other side. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to the components. So my main thing is the cell membrane. This is what keeps things intact and the cell structure intact. So cell membrane, okay. And here's an image I drew here for you, created with actually PowerPoint, but it presents the image that for the membrane basically. So it's two layers of phospholipid. That is what the cell membrane is made of. Two layers. So you can see here, this here is a phospholipid. Okay, so that is a phospholipid, and we have two layers of phospholipid. Simple enough. That's it for now. Two layers of phospholipid. Now, each phospholipid has a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. This means that it has each phospholipid, so this unit here, this structure, okay, has one side that likes water, right? Hydrophilic, it likes water, which is this blue part here I drew, and the other side that's hydrophobic does not like water, okay? So it means it's fat, it's in a way fat soluble. So when you say hydrophobic, it means fat soluble or lipid soluble. And when you say hydrophilic, it means water soluble. Okay. All right. So the hydrophobic portion is directed. See the hydrophobic portion. Let's just call them the legs. Okay. The legs here, the hydrophobic portion, or the tail, as they said here, is directed inward. So this is the hydrophobic portion. Other components in the membrane are protein carriers, protein channels. So also you have these things like this here is kind of as a channel, for example. Okay, so that's pretty much the structure. Okay, let's review that again, because it's very important. So you can see here the cell membrane is two layers of phospholipid. Here's one phospholipid, right? The phospholipid head, or the head portion, is hydrophilic. It likes water. So that's why I have it in blue, because let's imagine that it's kind of watery. It's okay with water. The lipid tail is this portion here. This area does not like water. So you could kind of think that we have a thickened layer here that's fat soluble, right? That because when the two come together inward like this, they create a thicker layer of lipid soluble. So the concept here is that a way to memorize this is just that these hydrophilic parts should be facing the surfaces on the outside and the inside. These parts. Why? Because your body is mainly made of water, right? So there's going to be a lot of water here on the outside and a lot of water on the inside as well. Okay? So it's just the way I memorize it. It's not necessarily scientific, but basically these hydrophilic parts face the watery areas, so it keeps the structure stable. Okay, imagine if you put oil and water together, right? They separate. So it's kind of like the membrane presenting on the outside a hydrophilic portion so that it's stable. It's not just moving around and trying to run away or separate from the watery environment. So it's a way to memorize that. Remember, the hydrophilic area is pointing toward the environments, the outside and the inside. And what's sandwiched in between is that fatty area, right? The lipid area. And this fatty area actually is what separates the outside water from the inside water, because water can't go through the fatty area unless it goes through specific methods. There's ways for it to go through, obviously, but it separates the outside from the inside. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to say it doesn't go through. Like we're going to notice that it does go, it can kind of penetrate and go through in specific areas, but it separates pretty much things on the outside from the inside and keeps things stable. Okay, let's just say, and there's now in this membrane, there's a channel. So this is a channel, for example, and these give you a pathway for ions and other structures to pass. Okay, so these, for example, cannot pass through this membrane, so it goes through here. Okay, that's called a channel, for example. This here is called a carrier, when it's kind of like a taxi, where it grabs something and goes to the other side of the membrane to drop it off inside. Okay, again, I want you not to remember the part where I said water it can't go through, because we'll learn about that later, that there is some sort of semi-filtration where it's stable, right? So it's not just freely going in and out. Okay, so that is the main part, the membrane. I hope you understand that now. Now after that, we have other structures in the cell. Okay, so I want you to remember in biochemistry, we have the body has carbon, and we talk about this more in endocrinology. Carbon and basically N, and hydrogen and O. Okay, so oxygen. So these make up the main biochemistry, the carbs, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in our body. Okay, so we're made of these things. Okay, these three chemical families, you could say, or biochemical families. Okay, so it's a good thing to remember that, because it'll be easier to understand the cell structure. So you have the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER. You have one that's a rough ER and a smooth ER. So our cell has the ability to make proteins and make fats from specific chemicals and nutrients. So the rough ER makes proteins and the smooth ER makes fats. Easy, right? Now, a way to memorize this or to remember it is because the smooth ER, if I take a cell, okay, the smooth ER usually looks like this. Let's say it's just kind of like a wavy thing. Okay, and the rough ER is similar, but it's dotted. So you'll see that it has kind of things in it. Okay, so that's why this is called rough ER, and the other one is called smooth ER. What are these dots? Well, these dots are actually ribosomes. So ribosomes, which is this thing that we took in microbiology. Remember, what does ribosomes do? Make proteins. Okay, so that means this ribosome is on the rough ER, these dots. That's why the rough ER makes proteins. The smooth ER makes fats. Okay. Now, these fats and proteins, usually before they leave the cell, they need to be packaged or enveloped or kind of surrounded by, or just modified by sugars. And that's what Golgi does. Golgi apparatus is like the shipping department of the cell. It takes these fats and proteins, it modifies them, and it makes carbohydrates and surrounds the fats and proteins with these carbohydrates. So they become in globules and of glycoprotein, and then they can secrete. So you'll find that cells that are part of glands, basically gland cells, have large Golgi apparatus, because glands will secrete, right? So glands will secrete things. So that means they're always shipping things out, which means they need a large functional Golgi apparatus. Okay, so that's pretty much some stuff about cell. We have also the mitochondria, which is where we call it the energy or the power plant of the cell. That's where glycolysis occurs. So glycolysis means it takes glucose and breaks it down to energy, right? And then we get ATP, and that's a form of energy, okay? So glycolysis happens in mitochondria. We said there's ribosomes. Now, there's also ribosomes outside of the rough ER. So if I draw the cell again here, and I say here's a nucleus, here's a rough ER, let's say here's a smooth ER. Again, you could, double check if you want the actual drawings, but I'm just saying if I have a rough ER and a smooth ER, there are ribosomes inside the rough ER, but there's also ribosomes floating inside the cell, not on the rough ER. So these are ribosomes that also make protein, but they make protein that stay inside the cell, okay? So ribosomes on the rough ER make proteins are leaving the cell. Ribosomes in the cytoplasm make proteins are staying in the cell. Then we have other things like lysosomes and peroxisomes, which is kind of like the waste management. They take care of all the byproducts. Then you have cytoskeleton, or the framework. So the cytoplasm of the cell here, okay? So if we draw a nucleus, the rough ER, for example, let's draw it like that, the smooth ER, then you have Golgi apparatus somewhere here, then you have a mitochondria, okay? The cytoplasm, okay, is actually on a microscopic level, it's a skeleton. So it's very the chemicals that make it and shape it. Imagine it's like a network of roads or just streets that allow chemicals and molecules to pass through and move from one point to another. So for example, something leaving the smooth ER actually moves in a certain pathway to get to the Golgi apparatus, because there's a skeleton there inside the cytoplasm. So just understand it's not just jello in there, it's actually organized, okay? And then you have the nucleolus, which is inside the nucleus, okay? And that's pretty much it. So you kind of have a review now about the cell structure. There you have it, okay? You got the full review. And then we focused mainly on the membrane, understanding the membrane, which is the first goal and the first step in getting or understanding this part of the course, okay? So that's it for the cell structure.